Bram Stoker's Dracula was published on May 26, 1897. The novel has never been out of print since its publication. In the last 120 plus years, the novel has been looked over, examined, studied, dissected, and criticized, with so many books and papers written about almost every syllable made in its pages by people way smarter than me. It almost begs the question, is it even worth sinking more teeth into this story?
That's a terrible pun!
It's not a pun, it's a double entendre!
Whatever, it's still terrible.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm CB Smith, and we're going to be talking about Dracula, both the movie and the book that's based on. And if you're worried about spoilers and things like that, well, I guess you better count yourself out.
Much like I did last year with Frankenstein, we're going to look at the Universal version first. Technically not the first Dracula movie. 1922 had Nosferatu, an unauthorized adaptation that Bram's widow Florence Stoker fought hard to have copies destroyed in a long, complicated lawsuit. Even before that, there was Dracula's Death, a 1921 Hungarian silent movie that, like many movies of this era, no known copies are around. It's considered lost.
Surprisingly, the novelization to Dracula's Death survived and was translated to English last year.
Much like Universal's Frankenstein, watching the credits in Dracula, you may notice something. It's not based on the novel, but instead a stage play. Movies were still a new medium, but plays, well, that was an older market that still was going strong. Stoker, being a stage manager at the Lyceum Theatre, knew that all too well. To the point that to keep the rights to stage adaptations of his novel, Stoker actually held a play of Dracula a week before the book's publication. It was not good, and only had an audience of like 2 people, but technically it was a showing. The play that this movie was based on was commissioned by Florence Stoker for both revenue, at the point the book was still selling but not enough to live off of, and to offer cultural legitimacy. Unlike Nosferatu, this is the authorized Dracula adaptation, and it was a pretty big success on tours and on Broadway, boosting the sales of the novel as well, which got the attention of several movie studios to adapt the story. The mythologized version that is told is that Carl Liam Jr. was the only one at Universal that liked horror movies and pushed it hard on his dad to procure the rights to Dracula. According to historian David Scull, there was a bidding war for the rights to adapt between Universal and MGM, to the point that Universal even placed ads out for their version of Dracula before they even secured the rights to the book or the play from Florence Stoker, which in the end it didn't matter because how American copyright laws worked back then. The book and the name Dracula were in the public domain in America, kinda.
So what we have here is a movie based on a play that was made to procure the rights to the book, which the play then helped the sales of said book, which prompted the story to be adapted again onto film.
Everybody got that?
The movie begins with Renfield, played by Dwight Fryer, whom would later play taking a page favorite Fritz from Frankenstein.
Fritz! Hello!
In Dracula, he's a real estate solicitor traveling to Transylvania to finalize the purchase of an old, worn-out house in Purefleet just outside of London and next door to Dr. Seward's sanatorium. The movie will spend the majority of its time on these 3 locations: Castle Dracula, the sanatorium, and the house in Purefleet, while the book is a road trip all across Europe and England. Renfield stays at Castle Dracula for one night, where he is greeted by our Count.
I am Dracula.
Bela Lugosi was not the studio's first choice to play the Count, despite playing him already on stage. But now it's hard to imagine anyone being him despite people trying. From the look to that voice is our idea of Dracula, which is a far cry from the book. Dracula is described first as an old man with a hooked nose, pointed ears, a long mustache, white hair everywhere including his palms. He's described as being able to speak English well with a less obvious accent. Lugosi at this point in his career could speak English, but when he was first playing Dracula on stage, he recited his lines phonetically, which probably helped that stilted dramatic performance that is so in line with the vampire now.
Listen to them. Children of the night. What music they make.
In the book, our solicitor spends nearly 6 weeks at the castle. In the movie, it's a single night. In the book, he sees Dracula scale the wall of the castle in the middle of the night. In the afternoon, they talk where we, the reader, are getting hints and clues as to Dracula's plan for London. He has maps of England with areas circled all over the country. He talks of wanting to sound as native an Englishman with as much knowledge of the country as possible, to avoid attention at being a foreigner. He asks if it's possible to use different companies to hide your paper trail. The solicitor sees locals are gathering together crates of earth and taking them away on a carriage. All the while, our solicitor is wondering what sort of monster is Dracula and what are his plans for him. While in the book we don't know until later, the movie lays it outright for us in the beginning.
At the castle there are vampires.
And then reiterates it later on.
Yes, Nosferatu. The undead. The vampire.
This adaptation of a play that itself is an abridged version of the book leaves this all out, but they did keep the brides of Dracula. Like the wall climbing, the brides are a highlight of the book, both expressing the sexual nature of vampires. They come to the solicitor in the night, almost like a dream, approaching him seductively. But there's also the horror of it when Dracula offers the brides a baby instead of the solicitor. The movie has the three look over Renfield and walk slowly towards him when he's passed out, only for Drac to shoo them away without any dialogue. While this wasn't the first movie with recorded dialogue, it's still using the techniques of silent movies where actors express with facial features instead of words. It's a little jarring in modern times.
Oh, hello. Can I help you? I gotta delete my Bumble account.
The next day, the two are on a ship with Renfield, now completely under Dracula's control. He is now his servant watching over him. The ship in the film was renamed the Vesta instead of the original name the Demeter, as they head off to England. The solicitor in the book originally was imprisoned in the castle while Dracula left in the ship. This leads to another highlight in the book. The captain's log of the Demeter is hearing from his crew disappearances in the middle of the night. At first they seemed like accidents until it couldn't be ignored that something is on the ship with them. It really is an awesome suspenseful scene in the book that's going to be its own movie soon, and I think it could work. It ends on a tragedy because the captain whom ties himself to the steering wheel in the book is blamed for the disappearances. So even though he meant well to do his duty, his memory is tarnished in the world of Dracula. In the movie, that's replaced with the blame on Renfield, whom, truth be told, Friar gives this generally creepy smile when people in the movie open the cargo door.
Hello down there. Can I help you? I gotta delete my grinder too.
With Dracula settled in England and the only one that knows how dangerous he is locked in an asylum and is enslaved to him, our boy the Count hits the town, going to concerts, hanging out with the local bigwigs, munching on poor flower saleswomen, you know, normal stuff. And here, a third of the way into the movie, that Dracula meets the main human characters of the story.
Some of you may have noticed that I refer to the character in the book as the solicitor instead of Renfield. Well,
the character of Renfield in the book is a random patient in Dr. Seward's asylum. He has no previous relationship to Dracula. He begins the story in the state we see him in, the asylum, talking of eating bugs for their life and blood. Renfield's existence in the book is an uncomfortable aspect of views of people with mental illness at the time of Victorian England. Dr. Seward is framed in the book as a state-of-the-art physician for the time. He talks of Renfield like a pet, literally as a pet in a section of the book. Less on treating him and more like, well, let's just see where this goes, shall we? Type of approach to treatment. Even then, Renfield is a tragic character in the end. The reader is meant to sympathize with him, but it's clear in the text not as an equal to the other characters. Aspects of this idea that people with mental illness are somehow lesser people and more susceptible to Dracula's influence are reflected in the movie as well.
He knows that the powers of evil are too great for those of us with weak minds.
So the movie made Renfield into the solicitor that visits Dracula instead of Jonathan Harker. Harker in the novel is the one imprisoned in the castle, escapes and makes his way back to England, traumatized by the experience. The experience in the castle makes Harker an important part of the story, since he's the only one whom actually survived Dracula. Taking that away makes him Well, what we have in the movie. He has the personality of a wet towel.
I don't mean to be rude, but that's the sort of thing I'd expect one of the patients here to say.
Which worked in the novel's favor because of the circumstances surrounding himself and his own overcoming of it. In this version, he could have gone away like so many other characters in the story with what little he offers outside of the fact that he's engaged to another character. What is left for him to do could just go to like Dr. Seward at this point. Seward is the owner and operator of the sanatorium near Dracula's house. In the novel, he's a younger man whom, along with his friends Quincy Morris and Arthur Homewold, they all propose to the same woman, Lucy, friend to Harker's fiancée, Mina. The movie changed this to Seward still being the owner of the asylum, but being Mina's dad, while Lucy is still in the film only as Mina's friend, not Seward's love interest.
But Lucy does get a love interest in the movie, Count Dracula.
This movie covered the major highlights of the novel: the castle, the brides, the shipwreck. Another highlight of the novel is Lucy and her slow, tragic death at the hands of Dracula. Lucy is a character that can be read a couple different ways. She's the perky, youthful innocent that exemplifies all the ideas of an upper-class Victorian woman. The chapters between her and Mina before Dracula sets foot in England could easily be put in the type of straight-faced romantic literature that Jane Austen was making witty satire about 80 years before Stoker. Lucy's 19. She's a good kid that just wants to be a good wife, and it just so happens that she had so many good men that want to be her husband. The other reading of her is that since she makes a remark to Mina about how she wants to marry all 3 of her suitors, Lucy kinda deserves what's coming to her. She's too promiscuous and flirty, something that will be played up in other adaptations. We see through Dracula that only evil practices polyamory. Whichever reading you choose for the character, Lucy's death in the novel is a long process of both suspense, hoping she'll pull through, and the mystery of what exactly is happening to her. The audience and characters may not know about vampires yet, though to a modern reader it's very, very obvious, and you're just hoping that your heroes will figure it out before it's too late. The movie doesn't have Lucy have any suitors, but giving her a haircut reminiscent of the then modern flapper lifestyle, a lifestyle heavily criticized by the more established conservative culture at the time, and her pining for a foreign stranger, does kinda lead her in a bit of that form of karmic punishment.
Well, it's like, how dare you, Lucy, want to go and boink the charming, good-looking foreign man? I mean, I'm straight, but, that World War I uniform Lugosi.
I do not care for hunky boys. Or do I?
If not those aspects being indicators Lucy is looked at somehow deserving her death, just the sheer way the movie just plain kills her off in a couple minutes. No grieving from loved ones, frustration, or hope that she'll pull through. Drac just comes in and is all wham bam thank you ma'am, and she's dead. Left to be gawked at in a classroom by Professor Van Helsing and his students before she goes and haunts the cemetery after dark for her own victims. And then there's Mina.
Mina is a interesting character.
In the novel, Mina is resourceful. She works outside of home as an assistant school mistress, so she makes her own income. She remembers the train schedules everywhere she and Jonathan go for easy travel. She's up to date on the latest inventions of the time, especially the typewriter and later in the novel, the phonograph. Everything about Mina would put her well and beyond the definition of what was called the New Woman in the Victorian era. Originally coined by author Henry James, the New Woman was originally describing wealthy independent women that immigrated to England from America without a husband. This definition expanded to all middle and upper class women seeking employment outside the home, to not be chaperoned by a man, and the worst crime of all in the eyes of this culture, riding bicycles. The same year Dracula was published, Dr. Shadwell wrote an article for the London National Review warning women not to ride bikes because it would make them ugly with bicycle face.
Mina never rides a bike in the book, but that's kind of the point. She has all the hallmarks of a new woman. Even so far as within the story, it's implied that in universe, she's the one that actually wrote and transcribed all the letters and articles that make up Dracula the book.
But despite having all the tropes of a new woman, in the novel she makes fun of the idea of the new woman, chastising at the idea of seeing someone in bed before proposing or even, gasp, propose themselves. A line in the book that feels out of place with the novel, but feels like Bram put it there to make sure to tell his readers, don't worry guys, she's not a suffragist. But Mina is the pure character. She's the one that everyone comes together to want to help, to kill Dracula and save her soul after Drac comes after her. The movie has Mina not have any of these independent attributes. Her role in the movie is to fill in part for Lucy's part in the novel. She slowly is drained of her blood by Dracula. She begins to turn into a vampire and under his control starting to portray the same stare that the brides had before.
Hey, I'm so happy I finally met someone that isn't, crazy, I mean, they would just, stare at me with these big bug eyes, and,
I make fun of the blank stares used by the actors, but that is a factor of Dracula and vampirism in the book. One of the reasons why Lugosi's stare was a staple in the ads in the movie, he puts his victims in a trance, as a type of sleepwalking. When Van Helsing and Seward exhume Lucy's grave in the book, Helsing tells his theory about how when people are bitten, they're put under hypnosis, and when they die under hypnosis, so when they rise from their graves, they are still hypnotized. Hypnosis was at its height of believability by medical professionals roughly 30 to 50 years before Dracula's publication. In the novel itself, Dr. Jean-Martin Charcot, I can't pronounce French words, was name-dropped several times to give legitimacy to the power of hypnosis in the book. He died 4 years before Dracula was published. Charcot was not actually a quack, though. He believed that hypnosis had medical promise, but the popularity of it as a parlor game destroyed its quote-unquote legitimacy in the medical field. But he paved the way in stopping the notion that hysteria was primarily found only in women, and that prejudice stopped men from seeking much-needed treatment. He tried to connect the power of hypnosis to the mentally ill, but in recognizing that hysteria is linked to trauma, like work accidents and war, Charcot helped set our recognition of what PTSD is in the modern times. Hypnosis was still practiced during the times of Dracula's publication. The reason why it fell off was, one, it didn't really work. What was hypnosis is just persuasion, and two, it was tried to be used as a form of anesthesia for surgeries, until nitrous oxide came about when Horace Wells used it on a patient in 1844, and that actually worked. Nevertheless, hypnosis was a favorite method among fiction writers, especially horror and pulp, up to, well, now. I'm sure it's used in some fashion somewhere. In the book, Dracula puts his victims in a trance, and hypnosis plays a large role in how our heroes stop Dracula, with Mina put under a trance by Professor Abraham Van Helsing.
I mentioned Helsing before in this video, and it was a combination of this movie and the book where this character starts to morph into the Sherlock to Dracula's Moriarty. Or is it Dracula's Sherlock to Helsing's Moriarty? However that phrase goes.
In the book, as Lucy's condition worsens and Seward is at a loss, he contacts his mentor, Dr. Abraham Van Helsing, to come by and help. Helsing introduces himself in letters in the book as Abraham Van Helsing, MD, PhD, LITD, etc., etc. Like, literally, etc. is in his title because there's so many. He's described by Seward as a philosopher and a metaphysician, and later on he reveals to also be a lawyer. Like in the movie, he is the first to know exactly what Dracula is, he's the first to convince the group what they are, and how to stop him.
Being an author whom had several careers in his life, named Abraham, and you write the wise mentor figure with literal uncountable doctorates, being the voice of reason, also named Abraham in your novel. Stoker, buddy, I think I know what you're getting at. I'm just glad you added like half a dozen other characters to share the spotlight with you. Unlike Brian Aldiss and his character Joe Bodeland. We'll go over him later.
Helsing in the movie is a wise mentor figure, but being a similar age to the movie's Dr. Seward, he appears to be more of a colleague than a mentor. Still, in the movie, Dracula confronts Helsing, and only Helsing, when he notices everyone is getting wise to what he is. This is a scene that places Helsing as a type of arch-nemesis to Dracula that has played up and overexpanded over the years. Within the end, it was Helsing being the one that gives the killing blow to Dracula in the movie, versus the collaborative effort of every main character in the book.
Some of y'all may have noticed that this video was kind of disjointed, where this was more of a breakdown of characters than story. Well,
The Universal Dracula movie is a great movie for a film studies course. The big sweeping sets, the long pauses, the absence of music in between dialogue, the reliance of using a single room for many set pieces, it harkens to those experiences of viewing Dracula as the stage play that this is an adaptation of, which is not bad, it's just that not what modern audiences would find interesting as a movie, especially if they have read the book then watched this very watered down version. David Scull explains that he thinks the director Todd Browning's heart wasn't in it for this project, as he was still grieving over the loss of his friend, actor Lon Chaney, whom was originally planned to play Dracula before Lugosi. In the end, it doesn't matter what I think. This movie came out during the height of the Great Depression and pretty much saved Universal Studios for a time. It was sold in 1936. The sets here would be used again for Frankenstein, which I think is the better movie. More on-screen violence instead of cutaways from neck-biting, more edits from the camera making it flow better. Still, you have to crawl before you can walk. Dracula was not the first vampire movie. It wasn't the first vampire book. Hell, it wasn't even the first vampire book with a count set in the Carpathian Mountains. But this movie, at least, was the trendsetter. Ask someone to do a vampire accent, it's probably Bela Lugosi. Ask someone to dress like a vampire, good chance it would be the ballroom outfit or something else, as vampires gained popularity over the years.
These people don't know anything about vampires. What they are, how they live, how they dress.
Since this movie was such a radically different adaptation to the source material, it was only a matter of time till we get a more proper adaptation. At least that's the impression with the title, and we're going to cover that next time. This is CB Smith, and thanks for taking a page. Hi everyone, thank you for watching. This series is helped partially by my patrons over at the crowdfunding site Patreon, where for $2 a month, you're given early access to my videos, as well as your name will be listed in the credits below. You'll have access to some behind the scenes, and your name will be automatically added in for the occasional giveaways that I run. If that doesn't sound very enticing, I always appreciate a like and subscription if you enjoy what I do. It helps the channel grow. In the meantime, look out for the next episode where we talk about the 1992 adaptation of Dracula. Thank you all, and have a safe Halloween.